I kept driving long after the asphalt disappeared. First, the blacktop narrowed into broken pavement. Then the pavement dissolved into gravel. The gravel surrendered to dirt. The dirt thinned into twin ruts, cutting through dry grass and scrub oak. When those tire tracks finally faded into nothing but flattened weeds, I stopped. That was the point. No signal, no cabins, no Forest Service markers, no names on maps. Just wilderness thick enough to swallow sound. I had chosen a stretch of backcountry near an unnamed tributary, miles beyond the last registered trailhead. The GPS had already given up. My phone read no service an hour earlier. Exactly what I wanted. Solitude has a texture when it's real. It presses in around you, it changes the air. I parked beside a narrow, fast-moving stream that carved a silver path between granite and fallen timber. The water was loud, a constant rushing presence. But beyond it lay an expansive, dense forest so thick it seemed to absorb light. I pitched my tent on a raised patch of ground above the water line and built a small cooking fire. The sky dimmed quickly beneath the canopy. Twilight here wasn't gradual, it collapsed. Charcoal blue turned to deep violet, shadows merged. The first night alone in the deep woods always feels electric. Every sense sharpens, every sound becomes meaningful. But eventually you adjust. I cooked rice and dried meat, ate slowly and listened. Insects stitched the darkness together with steady rhythm. Branches shifted as temperatures dropped. The stream continued its endless speech. It felt right until it didn't. Around 12:17 a.m., I heard something that didn't belong. A sharp rising note, not an animal cry. Not wind a tone, clean, brief, deliberate. It came from upriver somewhere beyond sight. I waited, 10 seconds passed. The exact same tone returned. Identical pitch, identical length, closer. I stood slowly and swept my headlamp toward the trees. The beam carved a pale cone into the forest wall bark. Leaves emptiness, nothing moved. I told myself it was echo distortion, water can bend sound. Trees scatter at distance lies at night. I sat again 10 seconds. The tone came a third time. Now it was near the edge of the firelight and it wasn't natural. It had the unmistakable quality of breath forced through shaped lips. Someone imitating a whistle? I extinguished the fire immediately and stepped into my tent, sealing both layers tight. Fabric may be thin, but it feels like armor when fear begins to bloom. I lay still, listening. The stream sounded too loud now. Almost theatrical. 10 seconds passed. Instead of the whistle, something new emerged. A throat sound, wet, controlled, like someone clearing their voice intentionally. It came from behind the tent. 10 seconds it repeated. Exact same texture, exact same duration. The repetition wasn't organic. It was measured. I reached toward the tent wall near my boots and felt moisture soaking through the ground sheet. My boots had been placed under. The rain fly near the entrance. Now they were pressed directly against the nylon wall. Something had moved them. The throat sound stopped. Silence expanded, then a whisper. Low, fragmented, 3 seconds apart this time. Whisper, pause, whisper. Not random syllables, cadence pattern. The tone pricked under my skin because it felt familiar. I flattened myself against the tent floor and strained to understand it. It wasn't language. Not exactly, it was my voice. My pitch, my breath spacing, my inflection, repeating broken phrases I had spoken earlier that day. I'll be back Sunday, I'm fine, it's just 2 nights. The words were distorted but recognizable. The thing outside wasn't making sound. It was replaying me. I scrambled backward, just as a weight pressed against the tent wall where my head had been. The whispering stopped. Heavy breathing replaced it, slow, deliberate. It moved along the tent's perimeter, brushing fabric. When it reached the door, something metallic clinked. My steel camping cup, but the sound came from inside the tent. Near the entrance, I stared at the zipper. I had not opened it. A soft dragging noise rolled across the 10th floor. The cup moved inside, then I heard fabric shift above me. The rain fly rustled, a zipper slid. Not the main door, I had locked that tight. The outer layer, it had opened the rain cover. Now it was working on the inner mesh. The tiny metal teeth vibrated, slowly opening from the outside. I didn't wait. I cut the tent floor with my knife and tore through the seam, crawling onto bare earth and rolling down slope into darkness. I ran barefoot through bramble and stone. Across the stream, cold water shocked my legs numb. But I didn't stop, I didn't look back. I collapsed behind a fallen cedar nearly a mile away. Nothing followed, no repetition, no breathing, just forest. At dawn, I limped back toward my truck, retrieved it, and when sunlight strengthened enough to feel rational again, I returned to the campsite. Everything appeared untouched. Fire pit intact, chair upright. No tracks but the tent. The rainfly lay open and flattened. The inner mesh was unzipped completely. Inside my cot was flipped, my sleeping bag, spread smooth and arranged carefully in a straight line across it. My boots, my knife, my steel cup, placed with precision. Not scattered, not stolen. Displayed. I left. I told no one for 2 weeks. I convinced myself it was stress. Until the repetition started at home, a microwave beep. 7 seconds later, the same beep from the hallway. My upstairs neighbor dropping something. 7 seconds later, the same crash from my bathroom. A passing ambulance siren. 7 seconds later, identical siren. But there was no second vehicle. The intervals were shortening. 6 seconds, 5, 4. Then something changed. One night I dropped a ceramic bowl in my kitchen. It shattered sharply. 4 seconds later, the exact same crash came from my bedroom. When I entered my camping cup, sat in the center of the floor, surrounded by ceramic fragments. Same color as my broken bowl. I do not own a second bowl. I moved out, stayed with a friend. The repetition followed. Their laughter echoed seconds later from an empty corridor. Their door creaked twice, but they only opened it once. And yesterday, alone in the apartment, I said, "What do you want?" 3 seconds later from the kitchen, my voice answered, "Stay." I had not said that word. It's no longer copying, it's anticipating. The interval now is 2 seconds. Tonight I'm going to test it. I'm going to speak and count. I need to know what happens when the gap reaches 0. When the sound and the echo happen simultaneously, because I don't think it's learning anymore. I think it's synchronizing. And when there's no delay, there won't be 2 voices, only one. I wasn't supposed to camp there. The trail to the plateau was estimated at 5 hours, and I had calculated my timing badly. By the time I reached the upper ridges, the sun had already begun dissolving into the horizon, bleeding orange and deep crimson across the sky. The official campsite was still miles ahead, perched on a rocky ledge known for its absolute stillness. That silence was the whole reason I came, but I ran out of daylight. Instead of pushing forward through one familiar terrain in the dark, I settled for a narrow pocket of space, wedged between 2 enormous stone formations. They leaned toward each other like broken teeth, forming a shallow cradle just wide enough for my one-man tent. It wasn't ideal, but it was sheltered. As I cleared loose gravel and pitched my tent, something about the ground bothered me. It wasn't soil, it wasn't sand either. It felt like a thin layer of grit, scattered over something dense and hollow. The air was unmoving, not calm unmoving. No wind brushed the scrub pines. No insects hummed, no distant rustle of wildlife. It wasn't the peaceful quiet I had imagined. It felt suspended, like the world was holding its breath. I sat down to eat a cold dinner. That's when I felt it, not heard, felt. A dull vibration rose through the soles of my boots. Then thud. It was deep, heavy, muffled, as if something massive had dropped far beneath me. Onto a concrete floor, I froze mid-bite. Another 40 seconds passed. Thud. This time I felt it more clearly under the boulder to my left. I told myself it was geological activity. The plateau was riddled with volcanic tunnels and lava tubes. Maybe rocks were collapsing in underground chambers. Sound travels strangely through stone. That explanation worked until I stood up. The moment my weight shifted off the center of the campsite. Thud, louder, closer, as if whatever caused it had reacted to my movement. A slow unease crawled up my spine. I stepped toward the larger boulder and knocked on its surface with my knuckles. Solid granite answered back with a sharp metallic ring. Nothing hollow about it. I moved back toward my tent. Thud. This time the vibration was unmistakable, and it was directly beneath the center of the space between the 2 stones. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. The boulders didn't sit flat on the earth. They angled inward, forming a triangular gap at the base, an opening. I crouched and aimed my flashlight into the crack. The beam fell into darkness almost immediately. The ground dropped sharply into black void. I couldn't see a bottom. A faint breath of air rose from the gap, dry, dusty, with a metallic tang like oxidized iron. I leaned closer, the smell strengthened. I pulled back. That wasn't just earth and minerals. I sat there for nearly 2 hours staring at that fissure, trying to convince myself it was just an ordinary lava tube entrance. I even searched for geological reports on my phone. Until the battery drained, the plateau was full of underground passages. That was all. This was around 1 in the morning. The cold became unbearable. I zipped myself inside my sleeping bag, knife within reach, and tried to sleep. That's when the sound changed. No more thuds, instead scrape, a dry, deliberate, dragging sound directly beneath my head. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause. It was rhythmic, focused, intentional. The thin nylon floor of the tent vibrated faintly against my ear. It wasn't echoing from far below. It was just under the surface. I pushed up onto my elbows and held my breath. The scraping grew faster, then heavier, then wet, a soft, sticky, slapping noise mixed into the rhythm. Realization struck hard. It wasn't scratching rock. It was clearing the thin layer of dirt and grit that covered the rock. Something below was moving the debris aside. Digging upward, I didn't think I reacted. I scrambled out of the sleeping bag, grabbed my flashlight and pack, and lunged onto the nearest boulder. The moment my boots left the ground, silence total immediate. I crouched on the cold stone and aimed my light at the 10th floor. Nothing moved. 5 minutes passed. 10. My rational brain screamed at me to calm down. Underground chambers amplify minor disturbances. Gravel shifts, water drips, cave systems breathe with temperature changes. But then I felt it, a low, subsonic vibration. It pulsed through the boulder. Not random, measured 4 seconds pause. 4 seconds pause, it wasn't rock settling, it was breathing. The realization hollowed me out. The boulders weren't resting on the ground. They were covering something. I slid off the stone to retreat, and my boot landed on loose gravel. My ankle twisted violently. There was a sharp pop. White heat shot up my leg. I collapsed hard, choking back a scream. Beneath me the vibration returned, stronger, longer. As if whatever was below had shifted, I tried to stand. My ankle refused. I crawled toward my pack, dragging myself across the gritty surface. Behind me, from the fissure between the boulders, came a new sound, a slow exhale. Warm air rolled over my back. The metallic scent intensified, now mixed with something organic, stale, ancient, using my trekking pole as a crutch. I began descending the trail in the dark, hopping on one foot. Every step was agony. My headlamp beam jerked wildly over jagged stone. Twice when I steadied myself against rock, I felt that same pulse beneath my palm, a living rhythm, like placing your hand against the chest of something enormous and hidden. It took 4 hours to reach my car. The fracture was confirmed at the hospital, a clean break. Weeks later, while researching the area out of morbid curiosity, I discovered something unsettling in local archives. Over a century ago, a small mining crew had attempted excavation near the same high shelf. The operation lasted barely 6 weeks. Their final, handwritten report mentioned persistent disturbances from below. Knocking, scraping, vibrations that responded to movement above. One miner described standing on certain patches of ground that felt stretched over a vast hollow, like skin pulled tight over a drum. 3 workers reportedly returned to collect equipment after abandoning the site. Only 2 came back. The third was never officially accounted for. The report recommended the area remain undisturbed. Reading that, I stopped trying to rationalize what happened. Maybe it's geological. Maybe interconnected lava tubes create acoustic illusions. Or maybe something else lies beneath that plateau. Something older than the mines, older than the rock itself. My ankle healed, but not properly. I walk with a faint limp now. I don't mind. It reminds me to test the ground before committing my weight. Because I've learned something most people never consider. Stone can feel solid. Silence can feel empty. But sometimes you're not standing on the ground. You're standing on a roof, and something below is aware of every step you take.